Hi, my name is Antoinette Banks, and we are going to be talking about autism spectrum disorder and specifically the biological psychology of ASD. Autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, is a neurodevelopmental disorder that is characterized by repetitious behaviors or specific patterns of behavior. These behaviors are noticeable when a child doesn't speak to you, or they don't make contact with you, or social interactions seem to be forced or awkward, or they're sensitive to light, to sound, to different noise. There's a lot of beautiful and intricate and unique things that are going on in the mind of a child with autism. 1 in 72 boys are diagnosed with ASD, and it's interesting because the diagnostic measures are not based on male, female alone, but more so the behaviors of the typical behaviors of male and female. Usually boys tend to be more aggressive, more active. They give you just contact with your eyes, and girls tend to not do that. And so it's somehow easier to diagnose boys than it is girls with autism spectrum disorder. The CDC also reports that in 2020, these numbers will increase. By how much? We won't know until the first quarter of the year. The word neurodevelopmental is an interesting word because really it's two words that's fused into one. Neuro comes from the word nerves and nervous systems. Developmental comes from the word develop, which means to bring out the possibilities of. So when you fuse these two words together, what you're really saying is that this disorder is bringing out new possibilities of the mind based on the intricate wiring of the nerves and nervous systems. Are you with me? An interesting study by Stanford University measured the minds of children who have autism spectrum disorder. And what they found are nerve endings are typically dense, from a typically developing child to one who's on the spectrum. A child who's on the spectrum has less dense nerve fibers, which means social interaction and things like communicating and making new friends and having eye contact is not as rewarding. In fact, it may become a little bit harsh for. There was also a study done by Columbia University that measured synaptic activity in the brain. And what that says or suggests is that children who are on the spectrum have an extra surplus of synaptic activity. What does this mean? This means as the signals are being sent into the brain, usually it's just firing at lightning speed for a typical person. But for a person on the spectrum, because they have this large surplus of it, it's misfiring, or signals are sent faster. And so things that are more sensitive to them make sense because they feel things so differently. In closing, an interesting study that was done from the University of Alabama also suggests that there is such a thing as plasticity of the mind. And so because you start with one space on the spectrum, you can be extremely severe. But with 10 weeks of intensive treatment in speech therapy, the area in the Broca's area of the brain that is for speech increases. And you'll see it below. I'll place a picture for you. But what it shows is that with intensive support, with intensive study, you can decrease the effects of the disorder. Allow the children or the students to have the best possible life. So what do I suggest? I suggest if you notice in your child or in your student, you definitely get them diagnosed. Get the diagnosis done so you can figure out where the child is on the spectrum or if impacted with a neurodevelopmental disorder. You need to get an IEP done, which is an individualized educational plan. From there, you can go to your regional centers if you're located in California, and they will give you the best support possible with respite care, speech therapy, occupational therapy, which is the movement of the limbs and different things like that. Or you can also pick up my book, Better Than a Diagnosis, A Single Parent's Guide to Autism, which explains it there.